The wedding dress hung in Beatrice Owens' bedroom like a death shroud, white satin gleaming in the harsh Texas sunlight that streamed through the window. And she knew with absolute certainty that she would rather die than wear it down the aisle to marry Carlton Hayes. Her father had arranged the union without her consent, promised her to the wealthiest ranch owner in Fort Davis for reasons that had everything to do with land and money, and nothing to do with love or happiness. Carlton was 43 years old, a widower whose first wife had died under circumstances the town whispered about but never fully explained, and Beatrice was only 19 with dreams of a life that belonged to her alone. She pressed her palm against the cool glass of her window, looking out at the dusty streets of Fort Davis, Texas, in the summer of 1882. The town sat nestled in the Davis Mountains, a remote outpost where civilization clung stubbornly to the harsh landscape. Her father's general store stood on the main street, a profitable enterprise that would become even more lucrative once joined with Carlton's vast cattle holdings. That was all she was to him anymore, a bargaining chip, a means to an end. The wedding was set for tomorrow at noon. Beatrice turned away from the window and began to plan. She had been thinking about this for weeks, ever since her father had announced the engagement at dinner one evening, his voice brooking no argument. Her mother had died 3 years ago from fever, and without her gentle presence to soften his edges, Thomas Owens had become a hard man obsessed with legacy and wealth. He did not care that Beatrice found Carlton repulsive, that the man's hands were rough and his eyes cold, that he looked at her like property. He was acquiring rather than a woman he wished to cherish. She waited until the house fell silent that night. Her father retired early, exhausted from preparations for the wedding. Beatrice had packed a small bag days ago, hiding it beneath her bed with clothes practical for travel, some bread and dried meat stolen from the kitchen, and the small amount of money she had saved from birthdays and holidays over the years. It was not much, perhaps enough to get her to the next town if she was careful. The floorboards creaked as she crept down the stairs, each sound making her heart pound harder against her ribs. She had left a note on her pillow, brief and to the point. "I cannot marry him. Please forgive me. I must choose my own life." She knew her father would be furious, that Carlton would be humiliated, that there would be consequences. But anything was better than a lifetime trapped in a loveless marriage with a man whose very presence made her skin crawl. The back door opened with a soft whine of hinges. Beatrice slipped out into the night, pulling her shawl tight around her shoulders against the cool mountain air. She had no clear destination, only knew she needed to put as much distance as possible between herself and Fort Davis before sunrise. Her father would come looking for her, and Carlton had men who worked for him, rough cowboys who would not hesitate to drag her back if ordered. She walked quickly through the shadows, avoiding the main street where late-night gamblers and drunks still lingered outside the saloon. The moon was nearly full, providing enough light to see by as she made her way to the edge of town. Her plan was simple: follow the road east toward Fort Stockton for a few miles, then cut north into the mountains where tracking her would be difficult. It was dangerous, she knew. Mountain lions prowled these hills, and there were stories of bandits and hostile encounters, but she would take her chances with the wilderness over the certainty of a miserable marriage. An hour passed, then 2. Her feet ached in her boots and the bag grew heavy on her shoulder. The road was empty and eerily quiet except for the sounds of night creatures and the whisper of wind through the scrub brush. Beatrice was beginning to think she might actually make it when she heard the sound of horses behind her. Terror flooded through her veins. She turned to see torches in the distance, at least 3 riders coming fast along the road. They were still far enough away that she could not make out faces, but she knew with sinking certainty that her father had discovered her absence. It was too soon. She had not gotten far enough. The note must have fallen from the bed, or perhaps her father had checked on her for some reason. Beatrice abandoned the road, scrambling up the rocky slope into the darkness. Thorny bushes tore at her skirts and scraped her hands. She could hear the riders getting closer, their voices calling out though she could not make out the words. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she climbed higher, searching desperately for somewhere to hide. The landscape was unforgiving, all rocks and sparse vegetation that provided little cover. Her foot slipped on loose stones and she went down hard, biting back a cry of pain. The bag tumbled away from her, rolling several feet before catching on a bush. She scrambled after it, her palms bleeding from where she had caught herself. The voices were louder now. The riders had reached the point where she had left the road. "She came this way, I can see the tracks," Carlton's voice, rough and angry. Beatrice's blood turned to ice. She forced herself to move, grabbing her bag and pushing forward even as her legs trembled with exhaustion and fear. The slope grew steeper, and she used her hands as much as her feet to climb. Behind her, she heard the men dismounting, preparing to follow on foot. Then, miraculously, she crested a ridge and saw a small valley below. A creek wound through it, glinting silver in the moonlight, and near the water stood a simple cabin with a corral beside it. Smoke drifted from the chimney, indicating someone was home. Beatrice did not hesitate. She half ran, half slid down the slope toward the cabin, praying whoever lived there would help her, or at least not immediately turn her over to her pursuers. She reached the door and pounded on it desperately, glancing back over her shoulder to see if the men had crested the ridge yet. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door swung open, and Beatrice found herself looking up at the tallest man she had ever seen. He was young, perhaps 25, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that were sharp and assessing even though he had clearly just been roused from sleep. He wore his pants and an unbuttoned shirt, feet bare, and there was a gun in his right hand pointed at the ground. Those eyes took in her disheveled appearance, her bleeding hands, the bag clutched to her chest, and the fear written plainly across her face. "Please," she gasped. "Please, they are coming for me. I need help." The man's gaze shifted to the ridge behind her, and Beatrice knew he could see the torchlight approaching. He looked back at her, something shifting in his expression, then stepped aside. "Get in." She did not need to be told twice. Beatrice darted past him into the cabin, and he closed the door firmly behind her. The interior was simple but clean. A single room with a bed in one corner, a table and chairs, a fireplace where embers still glowed warm. She stood in the center of the room, trembling as the man moved to the window and peered out through the gap in the curtains. "Who is after you?" His voice was low, calm despite the situation. "My father, and Carlton Hayes, the man he wants me to marry." The words tumbled out. "I ran away. I cannot marry him, I will not. I know this is asking a great deal, but please, do not tell them I am here." The man was silent for a moment, still watching out the window. Then he turned to face her fully, and she could see him properly for the first time. He had a strong face, weathered from sun and wind, with a straight nose and a firm jaw. There was something steady about him, something that made her feel fractionally safer even in her terror. "What is your name?" he asked. "Beatrice. Beatrice Owens." "I am Nathan Sutton." He moved away from the window. "They will be here in a few minutes. If they ask, I have not seen you, but you need to hide and hide well." Relief flooded through her, so intense she felt dizzy. Thank you so much." Nathan looked around the small cabin, thinking quickly. The space was too limited for many hiding spots. His gaze landed on the bed, then moved to a corner where a large trunk sat. "Can you fit in there?" Beatrice rushed over and opened the trunk. It was half full of blankets and what looked like winter clothes. She began pulling things out and Nathan helped, quickly emptying enough space for her to climb inside. She folded herself into the trunk, pulling her knees to her chest, and Nathan piled the blankets and clothes around and over her, leaving just enough space for air. "Stay quiet no matter what you hear," he said softly. And then the lid closed, plunging her into darkness. Through the wooden slats of the trunk, Beatrice could hear Nathan moving around the cabin. There was the sound of water splashing, and she realized he was washing away any obvious signs of her presence. Then came the creak of the bed as he sat down, and the rustling of fabric as he presumably made himself look like he had simply been sleeping. They came moments later, fists pounding hard on the door. "Open up. This is Carlton Hayes." Nathan waited a few seconds, playing the part of a man being woken, then called out in an annoyed voice, "Who is banging on my door in the middle of the night? We are looking for someone. A girl. Open this door now." Beatrice heard Nathan cross the cabin and open the door. Through the cracks in the trunk, she could make out the flickering light of torches entering the space. "What girl?" Nathan's voice was steady, irritated. "I have been asleep. What is this about?" "A young woman ran away from town tonight." That was her father's voice, tight with fury. "We tracked her in this direction. Have you seen anyone?" "I have not seen anyone. I have been here all evening and I go to bed early. There has been no one here but me. We are going to search this cabin." Carlton's voice, hard and commanding. Beatrice held her breath. "Go ahead," Nathan said calmly. "You will not find anyone." The cabin was small enough that the search did not take long. Beatrice heard them moving around, opening the cupboards, looking under the bed. Someone walked right past the trunk, so close she could hear his breathing. Her heart hammered so hard she was sure they could hear it. "She has to be nearby," her father said. "The tracks led right into this valley." "Maybe she followed the creek," Nathan suggested. "It runs for miles in both directions. If someone wanted to cover their trail, that would be the way to do it." There was a pause. Beatrice could imagine Carlton and her father exchanging looks, weighing this possibility. "He is right," said a third voice she did not recognize. "Creek would hide her tracks real good." "We will search the creek banks," Carlton decided. "But if we find out you are lying, Cowboy, you will regret it." "I have no reason to lie," Nathan replied evenly. "I do not even know who you are talking about." The men left, their footsteps heavy on the cabin floor and then fading outside. Beatrice remained frozen in the trunk, not daring to move. She heard Nathan close the door, but he did not immediately open the trunk. Minutes passed, stretching out interminably in the dark enclosed space. Just when she thought she could not bear it anymore, the lid lifted. Nathan peered down at her, silhouetted against the lamplight. "They have gone downstream. You can come out." Beatrice unfolded herself stiffly, accepting his offered hand to climb out of the trunk. Her legs had cramped from being folded so tightly and she nearly stumbled. Nathan steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Thank you," she said again, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "You saved me." "You are not safe yet," he said practically. "They will search all night and come morning, your father will likely organize a larger search party. You cannot stay here, they will come back." The reality of her situation crashed over her. She had nowhere to go, no money to get far enough away, no skills to survive on her own in the wilderness. She had acted on desperate impulse, but now what Nathan must have seen the despair in her face because his expression softened slightly. "Sit down. Let me think." She sank into one of the chairs at the table while Nathan paced the small cabin, clearly working through the problem. After a moment, he ladled water from a bucket into a basin and brought it over along with a cloth. Your hands are bleeding." Beatrice looked down and saw that he was right. Her palms were scraped raw from her fall and the climb up the ridge. Nathan sat across from her and took one of her hands gently, beginning to clean the wounds. His touch was surprisingly careful for such large hands, and Beatrice found herself studying his face in the lamplight. There was a kindness in his features that she had not expected, a gentleness that seemed at odds with his obvious strength. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. "You do not know me." Nathan did not look up from his task, dabbing carefully at the scrapes. "I know what it is like to feel trapped, to have your life decided by someone else." He moved to her other hand. "A few years back, I worked for a big ranch outfit. The owner decided I would marry his daughter whether I wanted to or not. She was a good person, but neither of us wanted the match. I left in the night, came out here to start over on my own terms. So you understood." "I understood." He finished cleaning her hands and sat back. "The difference is I am a man. I could leave and start over without anyone coming after me. You do not have that freedom." "No," Beatrice agreed bitterly. "I do not. Women are meant to obey, to accept whatever men decide for us." "That does not make it right." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. Their eyes met, and Beatrice felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. She pushed it aside, focusing on the more immediate problem. "I do not know what to do," she admitted. "I have a little money, but not enough to start a new life anywhere, and my father will not stop looking. He needs this marriage to Carlton to secure a business arrangement. He will search until he finds me." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Then he said something that shocked her. "There is one way to make sure they cannot force you to marry Carlton." "What? Marry someone else first?" Beatrice stared at him. "Who would marry me?" "I have nothing to offer, no dowry, no prospects." Nathan met her gaze steadily. "I would." The words hung in the air between them. Beatrice's mind reeled, unable to process what he was suggesting. "You do not even know me," she said finally. "No," he agreed. "But I know you are brave enough to run from a life you did not want. I know you would rather face the wilderness alone than marry a man you fear. That tells me enough about your character." "But marriage is—" She trailed off, thinking of all that marriage meant. A lifetime commitment. Sharing a home, a bed, children. It is too much to ask. "You are not asking, I am offering." Nathan leaned forward, his expression serious. "Look, it would not have to be a real marriage in all ways, not at first, not unless you wanted it to be. But legally, you would be my wife, and your father and Carlton would have no claim on you. You would be free of them." "And what would you get out of this?" Beatrice asked suspiciously. "No man does something like this without reason." "I would get help with the ranch," Nathan said simply. "I am trying to build something here, but it is hard work for one person. I could use a partner. And—" He hesitated, then continued. "I would get the satisfaction of knowing I helped someone escape the same trap I did." Beatrice looked around the cabin, trying to imagine staying here, building a life with this stranger. It was insane. She had known him for less than an hour. But what other choice did she have? She could not go back to Fort Davis. She had no family elsewhere to take her in. She could try to make it to another town, find work somehow, but that would be difficult and dangerous for a single woman. "What kind of man are you, Nathan Sutton?" she asked. "If I agree to this, I need to know I am not trading one prison for another." He considered the question carefully. "I am a man who works hard and keeps his word. I do not drink to excess, I do not gamble, and I do not raise my hand to women or animals. I have 30 cattle, 12 horses, and about 50 acres here in this valley. It is not much yet, but I am building it up slowly. I rise at dawn and work until dusk. I am not an easy man to live with, I expect, because I am used to being alone and doing things my own way. But I would never hurt you, and I would never force anything on you that you did not want. That is all I can promise." It was more honesty than Beatrice had expected. She thought of Carlton, of his cold eyes and the rumors about his first wife. She thought of her father's indifference to her happiness. Then she looked at Nathan, at the openness in his face, at the way he had helped her without hesitation. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "and this does not work, if we find we cannot stand each other, what then?" "Then we figure it out," Nathan said. "Maybe we get an annulment, or you could stay here as a partner in the ranch but live separately somehow. I do not know. All I know is that right now, you need protection, and this is the fastest way to provide it." Beatrice took a deep breath. Every practical bone in her body screamed that this was reckless, that marrying a stranger was almost as bad as marrying Carlton. But there was one crucial difference. Nathan was giving her a choice. He was offering her agency over her own life. "All right," she said quietly. "I will marry you." Nathan nodded as if he had expected this answer. "We will need to do it quickly, before your father realizes what is happening. The preacher in Fort Davis is out of the question, but there is a small settlement about 20 miles north of here called Wild Rose Canyon. There is a circuit preacher who comes through there regularly. If we ride out at first light, we might catch him. They will be looking for me. Then we will have to be careful." They spent the remaining hours of darkness making plans. Nathan gave Beatrice his bed while he sat in the chair, keeping watch in case Carlton and her father returned. She tried to sleep but found it impossible, her mind racing with the enormity of what she was about to do. Through the darkness, she could make out Nathan's silhouette by the window, patient and still. As dawn began to paint the sky pink and gold, Nathan stirred. "We should go." They left the cabin in the pale, early light. Nathan saddled 2 horses from his corral, a sturdy bay for himself and a gentler chestnut mare for Beatrice. He packed saddlebags with supplies and checked his rifle carefully before securing it to his saddle. "We will avoid the main road," he said as he helped Beatrice mount. "There are trails through the mountains that are harder but less likely to be watched." They rode out as the sun broke over the peaks, painting the rocks in shades of amber and crimson. Beatrice had ridden before, though never for long distances, and she focused on keeping her seat as they navigated the narrow mountain trails. Nathan led the way, his eyes constantly scanning the landscape for any signs of pursuit. The journey was hard. The trails wound up steep slopes and along narrow ledges where one wrong step could send them tumbling down the mountainside. They stopped only briefly to rest the horses and drink from their canteens. Nathan barely spoke, his attention focused on getting them safely to Wild Rose Canyon. It was mid-afternoon when they finally descended into a small valley, where perhaps a dozen buildings clustered around a crossroads. Wild Rose Canyon was barely worthy of the name town, just a trading post, a blacksmith, a handful of houses, and a small church with a steeple that had seen better days. Nathan led them straight to the church. An older man in dusty clothes was working in the small garden beside it, tending to vegetables that struggled in the rocky soil. He looked up as they approached. "Afternoon," Nathan called. "Are you Pastor Michaels?" "I am." The man straightened, wiping dirt from his hands. "What can I do for you folks? We need to be married. Today, if possible." Pastor Michaels' eyebrows rose. He looked from Nathan to Beatrice, taking in their travel-worn appearance. "That is a bit sudden. Are you both of age?" "I am 25, Nathan said. "She is 19. "And miss, you consent to this marriage freely?" Beatrice slid down from her horse, her legs shaky from the long ride. "I do, Pastor. I know it seems rushed, but we have our reasons." The pastor studied them both for a long moment. "I make it a practice not to marry people who are running from the law. Are either of you wanted for any crime?" "No," Nathan said firmly. Nothing like that. Then I suppose I can perform the ceremony. Pastor Michaels dusted off his clothes. Come inside. We will need witnesses, though. Church doctrine requires two. They found witnesses at the trading post, a married couple who ran the establishment. The wife, a round woman named Mrs. Fletcher, took one look at Beatrice's disheveled state and insisted on loaning her a clean dress for the ceremony. Cannot have you getting married in travel clothes, she said firmly, leading Beatrice to the back room. What kind of start would that be? The dress was simple blue cotton, worn but clean, and it fit well enough. Mrs. Fletcher helped Beatrice wash the dust from her face and hands, then brushed out her hair, which had come loose from its pins during the ride. You are very young to be getting married, Mrs. Fletcher said, not unkindly. That young man out there, he is treating you right. He is, Beatrice said, and realized she meant it. He is a good man. Then you are luckier than many. Mrs. Fletcher patted her shoulder. Come on then, let's get you married. The ceremony was brief and simple. Pastor Michaels read from his worn Bible in the small church that smelled of old wood and candle wax. Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher stood as witnesses. Nathan produced a simple gold band that he said had been his mother's, the only thing of value he owned besides his horses and land. He slid it onto Beatrice's finger with steady hands. Do you, Nathan Sutton, take Beatrice Owens to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Beatrice Owens, take Nathan Sutton to be your lawfully wedded husband? Beatrice looked at Nathan's face, at the quiet strength she saw there, and thought about the choice she was making. Not a perfect choice, perhaps, but her own choice. I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Just like that, it was done. Nathan paid the pastor and signed the marriage certificate, and Beatrice signed her new name for the first time. Beatrice Sutton. It looked strange on the paper, like something belonging to someone else. They thanked the Fletchers and the pastor, then mounted their horses once more. The sun was already sinking toward the western peaks, and Nathan wanted to get back to his cabin before dark. They rode in silence for the first hour, both absorbed in their own thoughts. Finally, as they stopped to rest the horses by a small stream, Beatrice spoke. You regret it already? Nathan looked at her in surprise. No, do you? I do not know what I feel, she admitted. This morning I was running for my life. Tonight I am married to a man I just met. It does not seem real. It is real enough. Nathan's voice was gentle. But we can take it slow, figure things out as we go. There is no rush for anything. They reached the cabin as the last light faded from the sky. Nathan tended to the horses while Beatrice stood in the doorway, looking at what was now her home. It seemed smaller than she remembered, more rustic. This was her life now, this cabin in the wilderness with a husband she barely knew. Nathan came up behind her, his footsteps quiet on the hard, packed earth. I know it is not much. It is enough, Beatrice said, and found she meant it. She turned to face him. Thank you, Nathan, for everything you have done. I know this is not what you expected when you woke up yesterday. Life rarely goes the way we expect. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger. But sometimes the unexpected turns out better than any plan we could have made. They ate a simple dinner of bread, cheese, and dried meat. Beatrice noticed there were few provisions in the cabin and made a mental note to discuss supplies. As the evening wore on, the question of sleeping arrangements loomed larger. Nathan addressed it directly, as he seemed to address everything. You can have the bed. I will sleep out here. Nathan, you cannot sleep in a chair every night. I have slept in worse places. He was already pulling blankets from the trunk to make himself a pallet on the floor. Until you are comfortable with other arrangements, this is how it will be. Beatrice wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her bones. The events of the past day and night were catching up with her. She retreated to the bed, still wearing Mrs. Fletcher's borrowed dress, and pulled the blankets up to her chin. In the darkness, she could hear Nathan settling on the floor across the room. It was strange to know he was there, this man who was now her husband. She thought about what her life might have been like if she had married Carlton, trapped in a loveless union with a man she feared. At least here, she had a chance at something different, even if she did not yet know what that something would be. "Nathan," she whispered into the darkness. "Yes. I think you are a good man." There was a pause. "I will try to be worthy of that opinion." Beatrice closed her eyes and, despite everything, fell into a deep sleep. The next few days established a rhythm. Nathan rose with the sun and went out to tend his cattle and horses. Beatrice explored the cabin and the immediate surroundings, taking stock of what they had and what was needed. The larder was poorly stocked, and there were no vegetables or fruits preserved for winter. The cabin itself was serviceable but Spartan, clearly the dwelling of a man who spent little time indoors. She set about making improvements where she could. Nathan had a small garden plot behind the cabin that had been neglected, and Beatrice began clearing weeds and preparing it for planting. It was late in the season, but there was still time to get some fast-growing vegetables established. She cleaned the cabin thoroughly, organized the few possessions Nathan had, and made lists of supplies they would need. Nathan seemed bemused by these changes but did not object. He was, she was discovering, a man of few words but steady presence. He rose early, worked hard, came in at dusk tired and dirty. He never complained, never raised his voice. He treated her with unfailing courtesy, asking her opinions about ranch matters and listening when she offered suggestions. On the third evening after their marriage, as they sat down to dinner, Nathan brought up the subject they had both been avoiding. "Your father will not stop looking for you." Beatrice set down her fork. "I know. He will eventually hear that I got married. People talk, and the circuit preacher will spread the news. When he figures out who you married, he will come here." "What do you think he will do?" Nathan considered this. "He could try to have the marriage annulled, claim you were coerced or that you were not of sound mind. Or he could make life difficult for us in other ways. A man with money and influence has many options." "My father has both," Beatrice confirmed. "He owns the general store, has investments in several other businesses. Carlton is even wealthier. Together, they could cause serious problems." "Then we need to make sure there are no grounds to challenge the marriage," Nathan said carefully. "We need to make it clear that this was your choice, made freely, and that this is a real marriage in all ways." Beatrice understood what he was implying and felt heat rise to her cheeks. They had been married for 3 days, but Nathan had not touched her beyond helping her mount and dismount from horses. He still slept on the floor, maintaining a careful distance. "Are you saying we should?" She could not quite finish the sentence. "I am saying we should consider it," Nathan said, his own face slightly flushed. "Not because I want to pressure you, but because it will make the marriage harder to challenge legally, but only if you are willing. I meant what I said about not forcing anything." Beatrice looked at him across the table, this man who had become her husband under such strange circumstances. She barely knew him, and yet she had seen his kindness, his integrity, his steady calm in crisis. She had been so focused on escaping Carlton that she had not let herself think about the reality of being married, about what that might mean. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. There is no rush." Nathan stood, gathering the dishes. "I just wanted you to understand the situation we might be facing." That night, lying in bed while Nathan slept on the floor, Beatrice thought about her choices. She was 19 years old, married to a stranger, living in a cabin miles from civilization. It was not the life she had imagined for herself back when her mother was alive and the future had seemed full of possibility. But it was her life, chosen by her own hand, and Nathan was a good man. She was increasingly certain of that. He worked hard, treated her with respect, gave her space to adjust. There were worse foundations for a marriage. She thought about the way he looked sometimes when he did not know she was watching, the loneliness in his eyes that mirrored something in her own heart. They were both people who had run from lives they did not want. Maybe together they could build something better. Another 2 days passed. Nathan came in one evening with fresh meat, having shot a deer that morning. As Beatrice prepared it for cooking, he stood at the window looking out at the valley. "Someone was on my northern boundary today," he said quietly. "I found tracks, at least 3 horses." Beatrice's hand stilled. "Do you think it was them?" "I do not know. Could be anyone. But we should be prepared." He turned to face her. "I want you to learn to shoot." "Shoot a rifle. You need to know how to protect yourself if I am out working and someone comes." The next morning, Nathan set up targets behind the cabin and began teaching Beatrice how to handle his spare rifle. It was heavier than she expected, and the recoil the first time she fired nearly knocked her backwards. But Nathan was a patient teacher, adjusting her stance and showing her how to sight down the barrel properly. "You have steady hands," he said approvingly after she hit the target on her 5th try. "That will serve you well." They practiced for an hour each morning after that. Beatrice found she had an aptitude for it, and there was something satisfying about the way the rifle kicked against her shoulder, the way the target splintered when her aim was true. It made her feel less helpless, more capable of facing whatever might come. A week after their marriage, Nathan rode into Fort Davis for supplies. He had been reluctant to leave Beatrice alone, but they needed flour, coffee, and other staples that could not be produced on the ranch. He left the rifle with her, along with strict instructions to bar the door and not open it for anyone but him. "I will be back before dark," he promised. Beatrice spent the day working in the garden and cleaning out the chicken coop Nathan had built behind the cabin. He had bought 6 hens from a neighboring rancher, and they were beginning to lay regularly, providing fresh eggs. She gathered the eggs carefully, thinking about the strange domesticity of her new life. The sun was low on the horizon when she heard horses approaching. Beatrice immediately went inside and barred the door, grabbing the rifle and positioning herself by the window where she could see out. 3 riders came into view, and her heart sank as she recognized her father's broad-shouldered form. Thomas Owens dismounted and strode to the cabin door, Carlton Hayes and another man following. He pounded on the wood hard enough to rattle the frame. "Beatrice, I know you are in there. Open this door immediately." She did not answer, her heart hammering. The rifle felt heavy in her hands. "Do not be foolish, girl. This farce has gone on long enough. You are coming home." "I am home," Beatrice called through the door, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I am married to Nathan Sutton. This is my home now. That marriage is not valid. You were coerced, not in your right mind. We will have it annulled." "I was not coerced. I married Nathan of my own free will. Leave us alone, father. Open this door, or we will break it down." Beatrice raised the rifle, aiming it at the door even though they could not see her. "If you break down this door, you will be trespassing on my husband's property. He has every legal right to defend it, and so do I." There was a pause. Then Carlton's voice, cold and menacing. "You think that Cowboy can protect you? I will destroy him, Beatrice. I will ruin him and run him off this land." "That would be a mistake." Nathan's voice came from outside, and Beatrice felt weak with relief. "I suggest you men get back on your horses and leave." She risked a glance out the window and saw Nathan sitting on his bay horse just at the edge of the clearing. He held his rifle across his saddle, not aimed but ready. Behind him were 2 other riders, men Beatrice did not recognize. "Sutton," her father said. You have made a grave error. My daughter was not free to marry. She was already promised to Mr. Hayes. Your daughter is a grown woman who made her own choice, Nathan replied evenly. The marriage is legal and binding. I have the certificate signed by Pastor Michaels. There are no grounds for annulment. We will see what a judge has to say about that. Go ahead and ask one. Nathan nudged his horse forward a few steps. While you are at it, explain why you are trying to force a woman into a marriage against her will. I do not think that will go well for you. Carlton's face was red with fury. This is not over. Yes, it is. Nathan's voice was hard now. Beatrice is my wife. She is under my protection. If you come onto my land again uninvited, I will treat you as the trespassers you are. These men with me are my neighbors, and they will testify to that effect if needed. The two riders behind Nathan nodded. They were rough-looking men, clearly ranchers or cowboys, and both held rifles. Thomas Owens looked at them, then at Nathan, calculating his options. Finally, he turned his gaze to the cabin. Beatrice, if you change your mind, if he mistreats you, you can come home. This is my home, she called back. Goodbye, father. She watched as the three men mounted their horses and rode away, disappearing into the gathering dusk. Only when they were out of sight did she unbar the door and step outside. Nathan had dismounted and was talking with his neighbors, thanking them for their support. When they had ridden off, Nathan came to her. Are you all right? Yes. She found she was shaking now that the danger had passed. Thank you for coming back when you did. I ran into Bill and Saul in town, told them the situation. They agreed to ride back with me in case there was trouble. He looked down at her, concern in his eyes. Your father will try again. Maybe not physically, but he will look for legal ways to challenge this. You said the marriage needs to be real to be unchallenged. Yes. Beatrice took a deep breath. Then we should make it real. Something shifted in Nathan's expression. Are you sure? She was not sure of anything, but she knew she did not want to go back to her father, did not want to be forced to marry Carlton. And there was something else, something she had been slowly acknowledging over the past week. She was drawn to Nathan, to his quiet strength and fundamental decency. Maybe it was not love, not yet, but it could be. Given time and patience, it could be. I am sure, she said. That night, for the first time, Nathan joined her in the bed. He was gentle and patient, moving slowly, checking constantly that she was all right. Beatrice was nervous but not afraid, and Nathan's careful attention eased her anxiety. When it was over, she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Are you all right? He asked softly. Yes, and she was. It had not been the passionate romance of novels, but it had been kind, and that meant more than passion. Sleep, Nathan murmured. Tomorrow is another day of work. In the weeks that followed, life settled into its rhythms. Beatrice worked on improving the cabin and garden while Nathan managed the cattle and horses. They were building something together, slowly and carefully, brick by brick. The marriage was real now in all ways, and Beatrice found herself growing increasingly comfortable with Nathan's presence, with the brush of his hand at dinner, with the warmth of his body at night. They talked more as they grew to know each other. Nathan told her about his childhood in Kansas, about how his parents had died of cholera when he was 15, leaving him to make his own way. He had worked as a ranch hand for years before saving enough to buy this land in Texas. His dreams were simple: to build a successful ranch, to live honestly, to maybe have a family someday. Beatrice shared her own stories about growing up in Fort Davis, about her mother's gentle wisdom and her father's gradual transformation after her death. She spoke of her dreams too, dreams she had barely acknowledged even to herself. To have a home of her own, to make her own choices, to be seen as more than just a commodity to be traded. You are more than that, Nathan said firmly when she confessed this fear. You are my partner, my equal. I could not manage this place without you. It was true. Beatrice had thrown herself into ranch life with determination. She tended the chickens and sold eggs to nearby ranchers. She planted and weeded the garden until vegetables began to flourish. She learned to churn butter, to preserve food for winter, to mend clothes and saddles. When calving season came, she helped Nathan with the new arrivals, staying up through the night to assist with difficult births. One afternoon in September, Beatrice rode into Wild Rose Canyon to sell eggs and buy supplies. Nathan had wanted to come with her, but one of his horses had thrown a shoe and needed the blacksmith's attention urgently. Beatrice had insisted she would be fine, and reluctantly, he had agreed. She was loading her purchases onto her horse when she saw Carlton Hayes emerge from the trading post. Her blood ran cold, but she forced herself to remain calm. She was a married woman now, legally under her husband's protection. Carlton could not force her to do anything. He approached with that predatory walk she remembered so well. Mrs. Sutton, what a pleasure to see you. Mr. Hayes. She kept her voice neutral, not friendly. How is married life treating you, living in that tiny cabin, working like a common ranch hand? Quite a step down from what I offered you. I am very happy, thank you. Beatrice secured her purchases and prepared to mount. Carlton moved closer, too close. Are you? Or are you just making the best of a bad situation? It is not too late, Beatrice. I would still be willing to marry you. We could have the Sutton marriage annulled quietly, claim it was never consummated. It was consummated, Beatrice said bluntly, gratified to see him flinch. And I am happy with my husband. Please leave me alone. She mounted quickly and rode away without looking back. Her heart was racing, but she felt a surge of triumph. She had faced Carlton and not backed down. She was not the same frightened girl who had run away in the night. When she told Nathan about the encounter that evening, his jaw tightened. He approached you alone. Yes, but I handled it. He cannot do anything to me now. Still, I do not like it. Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, Maybe we should go to Fort Davis together from now on. Make it clear that you are under my protection. But they did not get the chance. 2 days later, the sheriff from Fort Davis arrived at the cabin with papers. Nathan read them carefully, his expression darkening. What is it? Beatrice asked. Your father and Carlton Hayes are suing to have our marriage annulled. They claim I abducted you and coerced you into marriage. That is absurd. They are also claiming that I am squatting illegally on this land, that the deed is fraudulent. Nathan's voice was tight with anger. They are trying to destroy me. The legal battle consumed the next several weeks. Nathan had to ride to Fort Stockton, the nearest town with a proper courthouse, to file counterclaims. They hired a lawyer, which took most of their savings. Beatrice gave her deposition, swearing under oath that Nathan had not coerced her, that she had married him freely to escape a forced marriage to Carlton Hayes. The judge was a stern man in his 60s who listened to both sides with apparent impartiality. He questioned Beatrice directly, asking her to explain the circumstances of her marriage. She met his eyes steadily as she spoke. Your Honor, my father arranged a marriage to Mr. Hayes without my consent. When I protested, he ignored me. I knew Mr. Hayes by reputation, knew about the rumors surrounding his first wife's death. I was terrified, so I ran. Nathan Sutton gave me shelter and offered me a way out. I chose to marry him. No one forced me. No one coerced me. It was my decision. And this marriage has been consummated. The judge asked directly. Yes, Your Honor, it is a real marriage in every way. The judge questioned Nathan as well, asking about his intentions, about whether he had known Beatrice was promised to another man. I knew she was running from a forced marriage, Nathan said honestly. I offered her an alternative. I have never regretted it, and I believe she has not either. In the end, the judge ruled in their favor. The marriage was valid, and Nathan's land deed was legitimate. Thomas Owens and Carlton Hayes' petition was denied, but the judge also issued a warning. Mr. Sutton, Mrs. Sutton, this matter is settled legally, but I suspect it is not settled in the hearts of the plaintiffs. Be cautious. They rode back to the ranch in relieved silence. The legal threat was over, but the judge's warning echoed in Beatrice's mind. Her father was a stubborn man, and Carlton Hayes was not someone who took defeat gracefully. A month passed peacefully. October brought cooler weather, and Nathan worked long days preparing the ranch for winter. They had enough cattle now to sell some at market, which would provide income to carry them through the cold months. Beatrice continued her work in the garden, preserving the last of the vegetables before the first frost. One evening, Nathan came in from checking the herd with troubling news. 6 of my cattle are missing. Missing? Could they have wandered? Not like this. The fence was cut. Someone drove them off deliberately. Over the next week, it became clear that someone was sabotaging their ranch. More cattle disappeared. The water pump at the well was damaged. One night, someone tried to set fire to the hay barn, but Nathan smelled smoke and caught it before the fire could spread. They found no evidence of who was responsible, but Beatrice had her suspicions. "It is Carlton," she said. "He is trying to ruin us since he could not win in court." "I think you are right, but I cannot prove it." They took turns keeping watch at night. Nathan went to the neighboring ranches and warned them about the sabotage. A few of the nearby ranchers agreed to help keep an eye out for suspicious activity. The sense of community surprised Beatrice. She had thought they were isolated out here, but the ranchers looked after their own. One night in late October, the attack came. Beatrice woke to Nathan shaking her shoulder urgently. "Someone is trying to run off the horses. Get the rifle." They moved quickly, grabbing weapons and slipping out of the cabin. In the moonlight, Beatrice could see shadowy figures at the corral. Nathan fired a warning shot over their heads, and chaos erupted. The rustlers mounted their horses and tried to flee, but Nathan's neighbors had been hiding nearby, waiting for something like this. The rustlers found themselves surrounded. In the end, 3 men were captured. Beatrice recognized one of them as a hand who worked for Carlton Hayes. Under questioning by the sheriff, who had been summoned by one of the neighbors, the man admitted that Carlton had hired them to cause trouble for Nathan Sutton, to try to drive him off his land or force him into financial ruin. Carlton Hayes was arrested. Thomas Owens, having not been directly involved in the sabotage, escaped legal consequences, but the scandal damaged his reputation badly. Many people in Fort Davis turned against him for his treatment of his daughter and his association with Carlton's criminal actions. With the threat finally ended, Beatrice and Nathan could focus on building their life together. Winter came, bringing cold winds and occasional snow to the mountain valley. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and planning for the spring. Nathan taught Beatrice to play chess on a set he carved from wood. She taught him songs her mother had sung to her as a child. Somewhere during those quiet winter months, Beatrice realized she had fallen in love with her husband. It had happened gradually, so slowly she had not noticed until one day she looked at Nathan mending a harness by lamplight, and her heart swelled with affection so strong it took her breath away. She loved his steady hands, his quiet competence, the way he listened when she spoke, the gentleness beneath his rough exterior. She wondered if he felt the same. Nathan was not demonstrative with emotions, but there were signs. The way he always made sure she had the best portion of meat at dinner. The way he reached for her hand when they walked together. The way he looked at her sometimes, with something warm and wondering in his eyes. On Christmas Eve, they were sitting by the fire when Nathan suddenly stood and went to the trunk. He pulled out a small, wrapped package. "I made this for you," he said, almost shy. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have something." Beatrice unwrapped the package to find a beautiful carved wooden box small enough to fit in her palm. The lid was engraved with a delicate pattern of roses. "Nathan, it is beautiful." "When did you make this?" "At night, sometimes, when you were asleep. I wanted to give you something to keep your treasures in." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. "I have something for you, too." She had been working on a shirt for him for weeks, sewing by lamplight, trying to make the stitches as even and small as her mother had taught her. She had embroidered his initials on the pocket, a personal touch. Nathan held it up, clearly moved. "This is fine work, Beatrice. Thank you." They exchanged gifts by the fire, and then Nathan took her hand. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "When we first married, it was practical, a solution to a problem, but it has become more than that for me." He looked at her intently. "You have become more than that." "I love you, Beatrice. I think I have been falling in love with you since the first time I saw you standing at my door, so brave and afraid at the same time." Beatrice felt joy flood through her. "I love you too." "I do not know exactly when it happened, but somewhere between learning to shoot and tending the chickens and lying beside you at night, I fell in love with you." Nathan pulled her close and kissed her, and it was different from all the times before. This kiss was not about duty or practicality. It was about love, real and deep and true. Spring came early that year. Beatrice discovered she was pregnant in March, and Nathan was overjoyed at the news. They spent the spring and summer preparing for the baby, with Nathan building a cradle from oak wood and Beatrice sewing tiny clothes. The neighboring ranchers' wives visited more often, bringing advice and hand-me-down baby items. Beatrice had never had close women friends before, and she treasured these new relationships. In September of 1883, nearly a year and a half after Beatrice had run away from her father's house, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel Thomas Sutton, giving him Nathan's father's first name and Beatrice's father's first name as a middle name. It was a gesture of forgiveness, or at least of moving forward. Thomas Owens came to visit when Samuel was a month old. Beatrice had written to him about the baby, a difficult letter to compose. She was still angry about how he had tried to control her life, but he was her father and Samuel's grandfather. She could not cut him out completely. The visit was awkward. Thomas stood in the cabin doorway, looking older than Beatrice remembered, the scandal having taken its toll. He looked at the baby in Beatrice's arms with something like wonder. "He looks like you did as a baby," he said quietly. "Would you like to hold him?" Beatrice offered. Thomas took his grandson carefully, and Beatrice saw tears in his eyes. "I am sorry," he said. "I am sorry for what I tried to do to you. I thought I was securing your future, but I was just being selfish. Your mother would have been ashamed of me." "Yes, she would have," Beatrice agreed, "but she also believed in forgiveness. So do I, or I am trying to." Thomas looked at Nathan, who had been standing quietly to the side. "You are a good man, better than I gave you credit for. Take care of my daughter and grandson." "I will," Nathan promised. The visit was short, but it marked a turning point. Thomas Owens left Fort Davis not long after, moving to live with his sister in San Antonio. The general store was sold. Carlton Hayes had been sent to prison for the cattle rustling and arson attempts. The past was truly behind them now. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered as Nathan added more land and cattle. Beatrice proved to have a good head for the business side of ranching, keeping meticulous records and negotiating shrewd deals with buyers. Samuel grew into a curious, energetic toddler who loved the horses and followed his father everywhere. When Samuel was 3, Beatrice gave birth to twin daughters, Alice and Rose. Nathan had expanded the cabin by then, adding 2 more rooms to accommodate their growing family. The girls were as different as night and day. Alice serious and quiet like her father, Rose outgoing and fearless like her mother. The ranch became a gathering place for the scattered community. Beatrice started hosting dinners for neighboring families, and Nathan helped organize a cooperative where the small ranchers could pool resources to get better prices for their cattle. They built something larger than just their own family. They helped build a community. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Beatrice up into the mountains for a picnic, leaving the children with a neighbor. They sat on a blanket overlooking the valley, watching the cattle graze far below. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Marrying me so quickly, giving up the chance for a different life." Beatrice looked at her husband, at the face she had grown to know so well, at the man she loved more deeply with each passing year. "Never. Not for a single moment. You gave me something I never thought I would have." "What is that?" "Freedom. The freedom to choose my own life, to be my own person. And somehow in choosing you I found everything I did not even know I wanted." Nathan kissed her, soft and sweet. "I was going to say the same thing. Before you came into my life, I was just surviving, just going through the motions. You taught me what it means to really live." They sat together in the mountain sunshine, hands intertwined, looking out over the valley that had become their home. It had not been an easy road, but the struggles had been worth it. They had built a life together based on respect and partnership and love, the kind of love that grows deeper with time and shared experiences. Samuel grew up to be a fine rancher, taking over more of the work as Nathan grew older. The twins were bright and capable, Alice showing an aptitude for figures that reminded Beatrice of herself, Rose becoming an accomplished horsewoman who could ride as well as any cowboy in Texas. 2 more children came in the following years, another son named James and a daughter they called Margaret. The cabin had been expanded again and again until it was a proper ranch house, large enough to hold their growing family and the occasional guest. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, cattle sicknesses and accidents, but Nathan and Beatrice faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. When Nathan turned 50 and Beatrice was 44, they stood together at Samuel's wedding, watching their eldest son marry a neighboring rancher's daughter. It was a joyful occasion, and as Beatrice stood beside her husband, their younger children around them, she thought about the long journey that had brought her here. She had started as a frightened girl running from a forced marriage, willing to face the wilderness rather than surrender her freedom. She had found shelter with a cowboy who offered her not just protection but genuine partnership. That practical marriage had become something neither of them could have anticipated, a deep and abiding love that had sustained them through decades of building a life together. Nathan caught her eye during the ceremony and smiled, that private smile he reserved just for her. After more than 20 years of marriage, he could still make her heart flutter. She smiled back, reaching for his hand. His fingers intertwined with hers, a gesture so familiar it was like breathing, yet it still filled her with warmth. That night, after the celebration had ended and they had returned to their now quiet house, Nathan and Beatrice sat on the porch they had built facing the sunset. The valley spread before them, peaceful in the evening light. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Everything," Beatrice said. "How strange and wonderful life is. How that terrible night when I was running scared through the mountains led to all of this." She gestured at the house, the land, the life they had built. I think about that night sometimes too, Nathan admitted. How easily I might have turned you away, too worried about my own problems to help someone else. Thank God I did not. Thank God you are the man you are, Beatrice corrected gently. You did not just give me shelter that night. You gave me a choice, and that made all the difference. As the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they sat together in comfortable silence. They had built something remarkable out of desperate circumstances, a marriage that was truly equal, based on mutual respect and genuine love. They had raised 5 children who knew they were valued and loved. They had created a successful ranch and helped build a strong community. Years continued to pass. The children grew and started families of their own, giving Nathan and Beatrice grandchildren to dote on. Samuel and his wife built a house on the northern part of the ranch. Alice married a lawyer from Fort Stockton and moved to town, though she visited often. Rose surprised everyone by becoming a schoolteacher, establishing a small school for the ranching family's children. James took to ranching as naturally as breathing, working alongside his father and older brother. Margaret, the baby of the family, showed talent as an artist, filling the house with her drawings and paintings. Nathan's hair turned gray, and Beatrice found silver threads in her own dark locks. Their hands grew weathered from years of hard work, but they remained strong. They had slowed down some, letting the younger generation take on more of the physical labor, but they remained active and engaged in the ranch and community. On a cool autumn evening in 1905, when Beatrice was 62 and Nathan was 68, they celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary with a party attended by more than 100 people. Their children and grandchildren were there, along with neighbors from all over the region. People came from Fort Davis and Wild Rose Canyon and settlements that had not even existed when Nathan and Beatrice first married. Samuel stood to make a toast. His own children clustered around him. "My parents have built something remarkable here," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Not just a successful ranch, though it certainly is that. They built a partnership based on equality and respect. They taught us that marriage should be a choice made freely, based on love. They showed us that hard work and integrity matter more than wealth or status. Everything good in my life I owe to their example." There was not a dry eye in the house. Nathan pulled Beatrice close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, overwhelmed with gratitude for this life they had built together. Later, when the guests had gone home and the house was quiet, Nathan and Beatrice walked out to the corral where they had first hidden Beatrice from her pursuers so many years ago. The original cabin still stood nearby, though it was used for storage now. They had kept it as a reminder of their humble beginnings. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how much has changed," Beatrice said. "When I stood at your door that night, I was desperate and terrified. I never imagined it would lead to all this happiness." "You were so brave," Nathan said. "You still are. You took control of your life when it would have been easier to just accept what others decided for you. I could not have done it without you. You gave me the space to become who I was meant to be." Nathan kissed her forehead. "We gave that to each other. That is what real marriage should be, 2 people helping each other become their best selves." They stood together in the moonlight, looking at the life they had built. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and well-maintained. Their children were thriving, raising families of their own with the values Nathan and Beatrice had instilled. The community they had helped build was strong and supportive. It was more than either of them could have dreamed of in those early uncertain days. As they grew older, Nathan and Beatrice spent more time sitting on their porch, watching the sunset and entertaining their growing number of grandchildren. They told stories about the old days, about how they had met and married in such unusual circumstances. The grandchildren loved these tales, begging to hear them again and again. "Tell us about the night Grandma came to your door, Grandpa," they would plead. And Nathan would recount the story of the frightened young woman who had appeared at his cabin in the middle of the night, and how he had hidden her from the men pursuing her, and how they had ridden to Wild Rose Canyon to be married by Pastor Michaels. The children's eyes would grow wide at the dramatic parts, the near discovery in the trunk, the confrontation with Beatrice's father. And then what happened? The youngest ones would ask, even though they had heard the story many times. "Then we fell in love," Beatrice would say simply. "Not right away, but gradually, as we learned to trust each other and work together. Love is not always a lightning bolt. Sometimes it is a seed that grows slowly into something strong and lasting." Nathan would nod, reaching for Beatrice's hand. "Your grandmother made me a better man. She turned this house into a home. She gave me a family and a purpose beyond just surviving. And your grandfather gave me freedom," Beatrice would add. "He could have forced me into the same kind of marriage I was running from, but instead he gave me choices and respect. He loved me as an equal partner, not as property." The grandchildren would nod solemnly, absorbing these lessons about love and partnership that their grandparents modeled so beautifully. In the spring of 1910, Nathan took ill with pneumonia. Beatrice nursed him through it, sitting by his bedside day and night, just as he had once kept watch to protect her. He recovered, but it was clear he had aged significantly. His step was slower, his energy diminished, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Beatrice was as strong as ever. "I am not ready to leave you yet," he told her one evening as she helped him to bed. "We still have years ahead of us." And they did. Nathan lived another 7 years, long enough to see his first great-grandchild born, long enough to celebrate a 30th wedding anniversary with Beatrice. When he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 75, it was in the bed he had shared with Beatrice for 3 decades, in the house they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created. Beatrice mourned deeply, but she did not break. Nathan had helped her become strong, had taught her that she could face anything. She continued to live on the ranch, supported by her children and grandchildren. Samuel and James ran the operations now, but they consulted her on all major decisions, respecting her wisdom and experience. She lived for another 15 years, a respected matriarch who had helped shape the community and raised a family that carried on her values. She spent her final years sharing stories with her great-grandchildren, painting watercolors of the mountain views she had loved for so long, and tending a small garden just for pleasure. When Beatrice passed away at the age of 82 in the summer of 1925, she was surrounded by 3 generations of family. Her last words were about Nathan, about how grateful she was for the night a kind cowboy had opened his door to a frightened runaway and offered her not just shelter, but a chance at real love. She was buried beside Nathan on a hill overlooking the valley, just as they had requested. Their headstones stood side by side, simple markers that read, "Nathan Sutton, 1857–1917, beloved husband and father," and Beatrice Sutton, 1863–1925, beloved wife and mother. But their true legacy was not in stone. It lived on in the ranch that still operated successfully under the management of their descendants. It lived on in the 5 children, 17 grandchildren, and 32 great-grandchildren they had left behind, all of whom carried the values of integrity, hard work, and respect that Nathan and Beatrice had modeled. It lived on in the community that still gathered to help neighbors in need, following the example the Suttons had set. and it lived on in the story that was passed down through generations. The tale of a brave young woman who had refused to surrender her freedom, and a good man who had helped her escape, not by sweeping her away to some fantasy, but by offering her genuine partnership and respect. Together, they had taken a desperate, frightened moment and transformed it into a lifetime of love. Their great-granddaughter Margaret, named for Beatrice's youngest daughter, wrote the family history in 1950. In it, she included letters and journals from Nathan and Beatrice, as well as interviews with people who had known them. The final words of the history were from a letter Beatrice had written to Nathan on their 20th anniversary. "My dearest Nathan, 20 years ago, I came to your door a frightened girl with nothing but a desperate hope for freedom. You gave me so much more than I could have dreamed. You gave me partnership, respect, and a love that has grown deeper with each passing year. You helped me become the woman I was meant to be, and I hope I have done the same for you. Thank you for opening that door on that long-ago night. Thank you for giving me not just shelter, but a real home. Thank you for the life we have built together. I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you even more tomorrow. Forever yours, Beatrice." That letter was framed and hung in the ranch house, a testament to a love story that had begun in crisis and grown into something beautiful and enduring. Visitors to the Sutton Ranch would see it and ask about the story, and whoever was there would be happy to tell them about Nathan and Beatrice, about how a forced marriage avoided had led to a true marriage chosen, and how that choice had reverberated through generations, creating a legacy of love, respect, and freedom that would last long after both of them were gone. The ranch itself continued to thrive well into the modern era, managed by Sutton descendants who never forgot the story of how it all began, with a cowboy who chose kindness over indifference, and a young woman who chose freedom over security. Their story became part of the fabric of Fort Davis history, a reminder that sometimes the best love stories are not about grand gestures or love at first sight, but about two people choosing each other every day, building something strong and lasting through respect, partnership, and genuine affection. In the end, Nathan and Beatrice's story was exactly what it needed to be, a testament to the power of choice, the strength of partnership, and the enduring nature of real love. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and built a life that was richer and fuller than either could have imagined. And that life continued to bear fruit long after they were gone, in the family they had raised, the community they had helped build, and the values they had passed down through generations. It was a legacy of love, and it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.